or good morning, everyone, based on where you're joining us from. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Cindy Haight. I work in inside sales at SGS. And today we're going to talk about internal audits and management review. This is our third webinar in our free QMS webinar series. So if you'd like this webinar and want to come back for more, I think there's another one in just a couple of months. So again, thanks for being here. So this is our presenter for today, Ms. Sabrina Ippolito. Sabrina is a classically trained biochemist and a certified lead auditor. She ensures organizations maintain compliance in a realm of different industries. She has directed, overseen, and improved several quality systems. I can definitely rest assured that that is true. She knows how to help companies reduce deficiencies and increase product flow. She works in the US and in Canada. She's affiliated with the Professional Order of Chemists of Quebec, as well as the ASQ in the United States. Sabrina is also an instructor for SGS Academy. She just wrapped up a class for us yesterday. So she's a great presenter. I'm so happy to be here with her today. I'm Cindy Haight. As I mentioned, I work in inside sales for SGS. I've been with the company for about 1.5 years now. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, maybe a little longer than that. And I have experience in training, competency training, as well as certification. Here's just a little bit about SGS. We are the #1 leader in the TIC industry. That's testing, inspection, and certification. We have almost 100,000 employees across 2,650 offices in 11 global industries are covered or included within our services. And you can see we are approaching our 150th anniversary of being in business. So you can expect some big celebrations in another 5 years or so. We fall within the Knowledge Solutions division here at SGS. And there's a little bit about the different service options that we have. Of course, we offer certification to various ISO standards. We offer the competency training for your team. We can provide customized audits. You can see the next option there is SGS Transparency 1. That is a customized service that we've developed to assist our customers with managing their supply chain. And also we offer technical consulting. We believe in providing a robust and partnership experience with our customers through our industry experience, our global outreach, our global network, as well as our high level of quality of our services. And here's our agenda for today. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina. I do want you to participate in our poll questions. We have several poll questions incorporated into the presentation. You can just respond by clicking right on your screen. We do have a survey at the end of the session. It's a brief survey that we would really appreciate if you could complete that for us. We take your feedback and work on improving our service offerings and making better webinars for you. So we really would appreciate your feedback there. Please do input any questions to the Q&A section on your screen. We do have a large audience today, so we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. If we don't get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up. Also, you will receive a link where you can access a copy of the slides, as well as view the recorded session here in just a day or two. So thank you again for being here, and Sabrina, take it away.
Thank you so much, Cindy. You always give such nice, beautiful, warm welcomes. I really appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are joining from. I am excited and elated that you can be here with us today. I am going to be speaking to you about two of my absolute favorite sections of the standard of the QMS, which is ISO 9001, and that there's internal audits and management review. So this is really broken up into two parts, internal audits and management review. In the first part, we're going to do a very brief overview of internal audits. You might also know this word internal audits as self-inspections. They are synonyms one for the other. We are going to discuss some of the differences between doing a clause-based approach to auditing versus a process-based approach to auditing. I will share with you some of my preferences and why they're my preferences and why why maybe one way it would be slightly better than the other. I mean, both are accepted, but I'll give you different perspectives for both. In addition, I am going to provide you some tools, something for you to think about. Again, the tools are there just so that you can see. It's just a way of mapping out my ideas, my thoughts, and how we can apply the requirement of the standard or the internal audit, and how we can provide all of the information, all of the pertinent information that needs to be conveyed in a very efficient and an effective manner. Does this mean that this is what we're expected to see? No, absolutely not. Just run with the ideas. If you're looking for a different way of streamlining what you currently have in place, I'm giving the opportunity to you to look at what I would suggest or what I typically do when I conduct internal audits for clients. The second part is management review. Again, here, we're going to start with a very brief overview of management reviews. We're going to look at what the inputs and the outputs of a management review entail. In addition, there'll be some examples of tools that you can use, and we'll finalize the webinar today with some questions and answers. So without further ado, let's start. Internal audits. So what is an internal audit? Like I said, this is also synonym for self-inspection. If you're dealing with any of the regulatory quality systems, I'm sure self-inspection is a word that would probably come up quite frequently. Well, an internal audit or a self-inspection is a routine inspection within the company in which an assigned competent auditor assesses the organization's processes and quality management systems based on the criteria provided from the latest ISO 9001 standard. Basically, when you are conducting an audit, when you're conducting an internal audit within your company or within a sister company, you are always going to base yourself on policies. You're going to base yourself on the procedures. You're going to base yourself on the work instructions, on all of the documented information that makes up your quality system. So think of it from this perspective. If you are already certified, if your organization already has an ISO 9001 certificate, or an ISO 14001 certificate, or any other certificate, do not fall in the trap of auditing the standard. That's an external auditor's job. Essentially, don't make my job easier. Especially if I know, I mean, as auditors, we're usually very, very busy with our schedules. Our schedules are pretty packed. So consider it from this perspective. If you are going to audit the clauses or you're going to audit the standard, and I know that your organization does that, then theoretically speaking, I can actually start my external audit with internal audits. And you're kind of directing my way towards non-conformances if you have any non-conformances. So generally speaking, what I tend to tell people is the following. When you're conducting an internal audit, which is basically a control, it's a system health of identifying how well is your quality system. What you want to do is you want to really focus on your policies, on your procedures, on your forms, on your logs, your records, on everything that makes your quality management system your quality management system. Don't go based necessarily on the clauses. If you already have a certificate, at the very minimum, you meet the minimum requirement. So what you're trying to ensure is that you're not deviating from any of your policies or any of the procedures in place. So when you're doing internal audits, focus on your internal documentation. In addition, the task of the internal auditor include obtaining and assessing objective evidence fairly, remaining true to the purpose of the audit. So we're always looking for objective evidence to back up a claim, and the claim is either that we conform or that we're not conforming. Poll question 1. Does ISO 9001 require internal audits? Are we required? Do we have to do an internal audit? Wait a couple of seconds. Got about 57% of attendees that have responded. So no, they are not. They are, however, highly recommended, or yes, they are a mandatory requirement of the standards. We're at 60% attendees that responded. Give it another few seconds. Okay. Yes, they are. They're definitely a mandatory requirement of the standard. So in a year, before you get audited by your external auditor, there are two things you have to make sure absolutely that are done. Your internal audit. Once the internal audit is completed, the management review, in that order. Because the output of an internal audit becomes the input in your management review. So it is mandatory that you do an internal audit. If you did not do an internal audit and you get audited by your external certifying body, you will have a major nonconformance. Just keep that in mind. Major nonconformances have to be closed within 90 days, and therefore you will incur costs and fees because it requires the auditor to reopen your file. Let's move ahead. Look at that, another poll question. Okay, so true or false, internal audits can only be performed by employees internal to the organization. So A, false, they can also be performed by external individuals who are trained and competent internal auditors. True, only internal employees understand their policies, procedures, and all other documented information. Thus, internal audits can only be performed by internal employees. I like watching the percentage of attendees that are just answering. We're at 52%. We'll wait a few more seconds. Okay, let's see what you guys have for me. False. They can also be performed by external individuals who are trained and competent internal auditors. That is exactly correct. So when you're performing internal audits, you're not obligated. So there's no obligation that you must use people within the organization. And it's really there to provide you the flexibility, right? So if you find that 1 year, you're lacking resources, like I know that this is something that we're struggling with heavily in my neck of the woods where I live. Every organization, every company that I pass, whether I'm on the highway or even just going across by the corner of the house, everybody's hiring. We're hiring signs everywhere. So there is a lack of resources. So if you find yourselves that, this is a quality, this is something I have to do, otherwise you do get the major, but you just don't have the resources, you just can't get it done. So it does provide you, the standard does provide you the leeway that you can outsource your internal audit. You just need to make sure that you're following the right protocols and the right policies and procedures that you have in place for onboarding new contractors, onboarding new service providers, onboarding new product providers as well. So when we talk about external parties or external interested parties, we are talking about both from a raw material perspective, like from a product perspective, but also in terms of a service perspective. So you have to just ensure that the individual that you're hiring to do the job is competent. What does that mean for you? In terms of an internal auditor, that they have the right competencies, that they have the right certificates, that they have an understanding of the industry that you're in, and that they can actually and adequately perform the internal audit within your company. Just make sure that you get a copy of their certificate, maybe even a copy of their CV. You can ask if they have a log record that they keep of all of the organizations that they've audited, in terms of just to see what the scope of the audits were. Were they 9001? Were they GMP audits? Were there med devices, ISO 13, or even cosmetics audits, ISO 22716. So it's important that you address and that you assess the competency before you hire someone external to do the job for you. And then it's a question of logistics. You find a time that's mutually convenient for you all, essentially. Okay, good. So I put this clause is actually taken straight from the standard. And I want to go over this part with you because it's important that you actually understand what the words mean. You and I both know words on paper leaves room for interpretation for everybody. Someone who's reading the exact same words might interpret something differently. So I'm going to help navigate you in this terrain so that you better understand what those requirements are. So section 9.2, internal audits. In 9.2.1, the organization shall, the shall means that you're obligated. There's an obligation there. So the organization shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals. Who plans those intervals? You plan those intervals. Don't expect the standard to tell you what those planned intervals are. You will determine what those planned intervals are. Look in terms of how busy you are throughout the year. Consider your resources. You might decide not to do so many audits over the summer if many people are on holiday over the summer. You also want the resources available to provide you the pertinent information to better make an assessment to say that yes, you are conforming, or no, you are not conforming. And let's work together to realign ourselves and to mitigate these deviations. So the organization shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on whether the quality management system conforms to, so this is broken up into two parts, whether or not they conform to the organization's own requirements. So that's based on your policies, based on your work instructions, based on your procedures, based on your forms, based on your records, based on your logs. So everything that makes your quality management system, are you adhering to all of the needs and the expectations and the requirements as they are documented in your quality documentation? in your policies, in your work instructions, in your SOPs, in your forms, in your logs? Are you following it to the T? The second part is in terms of the requirements of the international standard ISO 9001. So I'll give you an example, because earlier I told you I don't want you auditing the clauses. I don't want you auditing the standard. That's my job as an external auditor. However, what you will do is when you are being certified, I'm very particular with the words that I'm choosing. There is a difference between being certified and recertification. A recertification occurs once a cycle is completed. That means you already had a certificate. So once a 3-year cycle is completed, then we start the cycle new, and we have what we call a V1, a recertification, which requires us to look at all the requirements within the standard, provided they obviously apply to your business. And then we have V2 and V3, which are called surveillance audits. Once that's completed, once a V3 is completed, then we start the cycle over again. But because you've already been certified, you're going to go through a recertification. If you are going through a certification, you just finished implementing a quality system, you will be going for certification. You're going to go through a stage 1, a stage 2, and all of the logistics that are required. Do a gap assessment internally. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the standard and literally clause by clause, subclause by subclause, be able to identify where all of that information is in your quality documentation. And if anything is missing, there's your opportunity to address it. So when do we really focus and spend a lot of time working on or auditing the clauses? When we're going through a certification, so the first time that we're applying for a certificate. And 2, during a transition year. So we are transitioning, for instance, like what we did with the 2008 to the 2015. And that's where you'll look to see, did I really address everything in the standard? But once you have your certificate, your due diligence, your job is really to look at the policies and the procedures and all of the information, all of the documented information that makes up your quality management system, and make sure that you are not deviating from there. And by doing that, you will always ensure that you are audit ready. And when you are audit ready, it doesn't matter when you have an audit spring up on you, you'll be ready for it because you know that you're not deviating. You have that proper alignment, and that's what you're looking for. B is effectively implemented and maintained. So this is also what you want to ensure. You want to ensure that your quality system, you want to ensure during your internal audit that your quality system is properly implemented and that it's being properly maintained. Be very careful with this. If you're sitting in quality, if you're hosting audits, it is very easy to create a monstrosity of your quality system. So be very, very careful. Whenever organizations, whenever clients, if you have customer audits, if you have any type of audits, regulatory audits, certification audits, customer audits, any type of audit, if companies are providing you with non-conformances that you need to address, think about the documents that make up your quality system. And think about the current documents, and can you alter one of your current documents to meet the requirement as per the non-conformance? Try to avoid at all costs creating a new procedure, creating a new policy, creating a new work instruction, creating a new anything. Because this is the way we go from having a very simple system to a monstrosity of a system that's so complex and becomes very taxing to conduct an internal audit. So this is just a little nugget of information that I want you to think about and keep in the back of your mind, because I have seen organizations have a very clean slate in terms of a quality system, and it doesn't take very long before they have a monstrosity of a quality system, because all they keep doing is adding procedure after procedure, document after document to it. Naturally, if a procedure needs to be written because you cannot find it a proper home, that's fine. Create the document. The organization shall plan, establish, implement, and maintain an audit program, including the frequency, the methods, the responsibilities, the planning requirements, and reporting, which shall take into consideration the importance of the processes concerned, the changes affecting the organization, and the results of previous audits. It is important that you determine when you're going to do the audits. It's also important for you to determine how you're going to do the audits. It's also important for you to determine the frequency of audits. I like working with very versatile tools. And by that, I mean, I like working with tools that allow me to showcase that my quality system is a live, breathing system. Understand one thing. As long as you're in business, you're doing business with customers. Whether it's a product you're manufacturing or it's a service you're providing, you're doing business with customers. Organizations, companies, clients, customers, their needs, their wants, their expectations, they change. So therefore, our quality system needs to be adaptable. We need to be flexible. With that in mind, we cannot have a rigid system. I mean, you can. How efficient or effective is it going to be? That's a whole other conversation to be had. But you want a system that's flexible, that will allow you to make changes on a whim. So I'll give you an example. We talk about here frequency of audits or being able to do an audit periodically. If you implement, say, for example, a program, an audit program, you can determine, you can identify, you can determine the frequency that you're doing through of that audit. So if you notice throughout the year at the beginning, let's say during Q1, you start noticing that, you know, in production, we're having a whole lot of non-conformances. Okay. So what should we do? Well, let's evaluate. Let's see what's actually going on. So what do? You'll perform the audit. You'll investigate the problem, and you take credit for that because you're actually performing an internal audit. And you might decide, contrary to the audit program placed in January, as an example, where the frequency of auditing production was once a year, you might decide that just so that I can have this process under control, I'm going to audit this a bit more frequent. Maybe to start on a monthly basis, because there's a problem I need to solve. There's a problem we need to solve. So you may decide to increase that frequency faster, sooner. So you'll do it on a monthly basis. And as you start seeing that things are starting to realign, you'll say, okay, let's now decrease the frequency and let's do it every 3 months. And let's evaluate what that's going to look like in 3 months. In the meantime, you're getting all of this information, this loss of quality, how much scrap is being created because of all of these non-conformances. And when you can start seeing that actually the changes that we are implementing because of the frequency of the internal audits that we're doing and the fact that we're working together with the people of production, we're actually starting to see a downturn. So we're actually starting to make our profit again, and we're starting to meet our quality objectives and those targets again. Then you can say, okay, so this system is now in control, and I can provide my support in other departments or in other areas that need that support. So you can go back to the audit program and say, well, originally in Q1 and Q2, as you can see here, we've been auditing production every single month. By the time Q2 hit, we decided to do it once in that quarter. And by the time Q3 hit, we are pretty much well on the money You can decide to do a spot check, or you can say, I don't want to audit this anymore. We will re-audit in 2024, and we will audit according to the plan that's already set. So it gives you that versatility to play around with your documents and to make those changes, sometimes out of whim, but you are also documenting and justifying your reason for making those changes. Selecting auditors. When you are selecting auditors, your auditors have to be competent. Now, do they have to go through formal external auditor training? No. If you have internal auditors within your organization, your internal auditors, through knowledge transfer, can also train those internal individuals. That's a possibility. Now, I can say, I know what kind of courses I give when I provide internal auditor training or the fundamentals course, and you really want to be part of those courses because they are really a lot of fun, and I get to tailor and give you all sorts of tools that you can use and see things from a different light, from a different perspective. But if you're looking for something very quick and you have internal auditors within your organization, your internal auditors within the organization can provide that knowledge transfer and can provide that information to new auditors. All you need to do is evaluate their competency, and there's ways of doing that. Example, through observation. You witness me do an audit, I will witness you do an audit, then I'm going to leave you off to go do an audit on your own, and the output from that should be the report. As you can tell, I really love this topic. So true or false? Internal auditors can audit their own department and their own work, seeing that they are subject matter experts. I'll give you a couple of minutes. We're at 50%. Let's get a couple more answers there, ladies and gents. A few more. 56%. Let's go, let's go, let's go. We're sitting at 61, 65. 67. 70. Good. Couple more. 73. Let's see if we can get at least a 75. Oh, almost there. Okay. Okay, that's right. It is absolutely false. You cannot audit your own work. You need to show independence. You need to show independence. So if you are in quality, and in quality, you're responsible for risk, you're responsible for non-conformances, you're responsible for corrective actions, internal audits, customer complaints, any of the customer complaints that are quality related that find themselves on your desk. You're responsible for the internal audit program, and you're responsible for management review. You cannot audit any of those. You can audit production. You can audit sales. You can audit purchasing, procurement. You can audit receiving and shipping. But you cannot audit, you should not be auditing your department. Now, I say should because there is a little gray zone that we can make use of, but you're going to have to justify it. So as an example, Cindy, I'm going to use you in this example. So Cindy and I both work at the same organization, and she and I are best buddies, and we both work in the department, in the quality department. If I lack resources, so let's say everybody in quality is an internal auditor, and then we have some people in production, some people in sales, and maybe one or two in a different area within the organization. But should those people, for whatever reason, leave the company, move on to greener pastures, we need to make sure that we can fill their roles. But sometimes we get so inundated with work that training ends up taking a back seat. Although it shouldn't, Unfortunately, it does. It's just the nature of the business. It's the nature of the way companies get run at times. So the one way that we can actually do this is I cannot audit my work, and Cindy cannot audit her work. So she can't audit the documents that she authored or the reports that she filled, and neither can I. But I can audit Cindy, and Cindy can audit me. And then we can randomly choose other documents in the department who were written maybe by Jennifer or Summer or David or Dominic. And we can just randomly choose those and audit them. The problem with that is that it's not as efficient. Effective, yes. Efficient, no. Because if you would have chosen someone completely independent, they might have looked at one or two documents irrelevant of the person who authored or who wrote that report. In this case, I have to audit Cindy and say another document, and Cindy audits me and say another document. So are we being efficient with our time? Not really. But it is a way to also meet the requirement when you have your hands tied. Just keep that in mind. Avoid it, but if you have to use your get out of jail free card, use it. Clause-based approach or process-based approach? That is the question. I prefer a process-based approach, and I'll tell you why. Organizations, companies will start off with maybe having a quality system in place, like a QMS, like their ISO 9001. And from their ISO 9001, sometimes they decide to keep it, but they'll do an add-on. And the add-on that they'll have, let's say, might be an FDA 21 CFR parts 210 to 11, which are GMPs for drug manufacturing. Then, because they're also manufacturing and selling in Canada, they might consider Part C Division 2 of the GMPs, which is also Guide 0001. They might have other standards as well. So the thing is, the majority of all of these standards, the majority of all of these certifications, these licenses that we go for, when it comes at least to the quality side, when it comes to the HR side, the training side, they pretty much all speak the same language. When you are auditing, it makes, in my opinion, no sense to audit 9.2 because clause in 9.2 is not reflected 9.2 in another standard. The process, however, is internal audit, self-inspection is a process. And this process is covered 9001, 14001, 45001, ISO 22716, ISO 15378, 21 CFR 210 to 11, Part C Division 2 of the Health Canada requirements, Guide 0001. You're looking at the process, okay? So keep that in mind. You can, if you wanted to, do a clause-based. I don't recommend it. For another reason, some people who use checklists and go by the clauses, it's difficult to see the big picture of the organization of what it is that you're doing. What do I mean by that? Well, I can audit 9.2, or I can audit a specific clause. Or I can say, hang on a second. Let me go to shipping and let me see what they're shipping out. Get that PO, that packing list, whatever, get a copy of it. Take a picture of it. Everybody has phones. If you're allowed to use a phone within your organization, take a picture of it. And then you can actually start your process of the entire supply chain, starting from sales, ending right into shipping. So then you can go to sales and you can say, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Sales individual. Show me how this product got into shipping. Oh, yes, this is a client that often purchases from us. We have a blanket order from them. Oh, good. Okay, walk me through the system. So what do you mean by a blanket order? This is not a terminology I'm familiar with. And they will take you through that terminology. They will take you through all of that information and whatnot. I apologize, something happened. They will take you through all of that information and whatnot. So whenever you have an issue or whenever you have a question or something that's not clear for you, you can ask the question. Whereas when you are just going based on a clause, it makes it very difficult for you to understand the grand scheme of things, the idea behind the process, the idea behind what they actually do. So by following a process-based approach, we get a much bigger picture, a much better idea of what we're actually doing within the organization, how we move from the quotes area to a PO. We can even identify process improvements. We can identify risks. As an example, I was auditing an organization not too long ago, and I said, well, take me through your process of quotes and orders. Oh, well, we have our quote process, and then from the quotes, we will get our POs and so on and so forth. And she's taking me through, the individual was taking me through the entire process, which I thought was fantastic. But then one of the questions came up, and I said, well, I don't know who's moving whoever's moving my my presentation. Can you please stop? Thanks. So the individual who, so as she was taking me through her process, I had asked her the question. I said, well, let's talk about quotes for a little minute. If you are going based on quotes, or if you have your quotes and your quotes are turned into POs, for any of the quotes that you give out, do you do any follow-ups? Because not everybody remembers to answer back to a quote. And her answer was, Sabrina, we are so short on resources. I barely have time to keep up with it. So no, I don't have time to deal with the quotes. I don't have time to follow up on the quotes. So I said, okay, perfect. I'm like, how do you feel about making this maybe a process improvement? And she's like, we can try. She's like, but the problem is that we're short on resources. So what we did is like, and I rationalized this with her. I said, think of it from this perspective. Management doesn't know how hard you're hurting or how much you're hurting unless they're made aware. So this is an opportune time to document some of the issues that you have in your department and to identify an opportunity for improvement, but I'll also identify it as a risk, because while there's an opportunity to increase your revenue, company revenue, you're not doing it. And you're not doing it because you're lacking resources. So you need to make pertinent people within the organization aware of this. So there is a strength with performing process-based auditing, because you can actually run down a rabbit hole, something you think is interesting or something you think that you might be able to help them with. And remember, as internal auditors, the expectation, what you should understand is that you're there to provide support to your colleagues. You're not there to give them nonconformances. When you are approaching your colleagues, you're there to show them, you're there to tell them, I'm here in support of your activities, in support of your functions. If there's any issues, we'll note them down and we'll see if we can make the changes. If there's any deviations, it is easier to change words on paper than it is to change behavior. And if you are in the right to make those changes, then you will make those changes to reflect the actuality of the actual process. So like we spoke about clause-based approach or process-based approach, I am of the camp process-based approach. Does this mean that if you have say a checklist, you can't follow your checklist? You can even use it as a tool. You can do whatever you wish with it, as long as you're showing evidence that you're doing a proper internal audit and that there's evidence backing up your claim that you conform or that you do not conform. So internal audits, I want you to think of it in terms of a process. So the activity is actually auditing. You're doing your internal audit. That's your verb, that's your action word, that's your activity. What initiates that activity? You have your schedule, which I highly recommend you implement. You have your trained and competent auditors, making sure that your pool of auditors can actually carry out the activity. And you want to create the internal audit plan so that you can provide it to all of the departments or all of the areas necessary that you're planning on auditing. Now, if you ask me, I usually follow the 2-week time frame. If you ask me, Sabrina, where is this written in the standard? It's not. But you want to be able to give people a heads up so that they can plan forward as well, because there is a planning aspect to it too. I generally give people 2 weeks. Some other people I know give a month. Other people I know will say, okay, well, we're publishing the audit plan in January, but that becomes also very rigid because things happen throughout the year. Sometimes you need a bit of that flexibility. The activity, like I said, is to actually conduct the internal audit. Conduct the opening meeting with pertinent personnel. You don't have to do an opening meeting for an internal audit. If you're taking a more formal approach, some organizations do, but it is not recommended. In my past life, when I was doing internal audits for organizations or for the organization that I was working for, what I would do is a huddle. I would work with my team, and it would be an opportunity to focus the internal audit. So let's say if I heard that they're not proper weather stripping the garage doors in the shipping and in the receiving area, and I know that my colleague Fred is supposed to go and audit there, then I'll probably tell him, hey Fred, heads up, just check to see that they actually did the weather stripping, because when I did the walkthrough about a month ago, it was a complete disaster. And now that it's summer and it gets really hot and humid in there, they have a tendency of leaving the door open. So just remind them that we have pest control for a reason, and that we don't want to have any uninvited gophers or skunk or birds or anything of that nature seeking refuge in our organization. And if need be, we'll provide additional training. But heads up, just go take a look at that. So those huddles actually help. At the end of actually performing the audit, there is an audit report. So again, another option is that you can have a closing meeting. Not required if you're doing an internal audit, but you can if you're taking a more formal approach. And from the audit report, because there's opportunities for improvement, you might also find some nonconformances, so you'll provide corrective actions. Another thing, when it comes to conducting with the audit reports, let's say, you're not required to classify as an internal auditor critical, major, or minor. Not required. All you have to say, it's a nonconformance, this is a clause we're not meeting, or this is a section of procedure or policy that we're not meeting and adhering to. You're not required to classify. What I want you to do, it's nice to give opportunities for improvement. It's nice to give nonconformances because we're going to fix them. I want you to try and make it a homework. Give Bravo points. What are they doing well? I have these nonconformances I need to fix. I have these opportunities for improvement. That's great. But what am I doing well? They need to hear that. And not hear it for ego or whatever, but is what I'm doing okay? Is what we're doing in this process fine? And if they blow your mind on something, congratulate them. Tell them this is exceptional. This is something I want to see if I can implement in other departments. You should do that. That's also part of internal audits. So this is what an internal audit schedule could look like. As you can see, I've broken this down into 2 years. So my audit cycle is 2 years. That's to say, you're not required to perform a complete internal audit in 1 year. You can break this up in 2 years, you can break this up in 3 years, and I try not to go more than that. If you have a very robust, a very concise and clean system that's clear and lean and the whole kit and caboodle, you can maybe justify the 5 years, but generally speaking, a cycle is 2 to 3 years. What you need to remember is anything that touches quality, corrective actions, nonconformances, customer complaints, obviously quality related customer complaints, internal audits, management review, anything that's quality related has to be audited on an annual basis. Don't forget that. Everything else, supporting functions, HR, environment, IT, calibration, maintenance, sales, sorry, I had the word in French, sales, purchasing, production, aspects of production, filling, compounding, whatever it is, those can be audited on alternating years. And always go based on risk. If you feel that, albeit production, I don't have to audit every year, but we're having nonconformances in production, my nonconformance documents reports are showing this, then increase the frequency of the audits. You're there to support them. You're not there to whip them. You're there to help them. You're the SME when it comes to standards. They're the SME because they're the ones that are working on the lines every single day. You work together to realign yourselves. That's the intent. From the internal audit schedule, we have an audit plan. So if you're in charge of putting together the audit plan, you will go based on this audit schedule to create the audit plan. And you'll notice on the audit plan, I go by months. Give the auditors the flexibility. Things happen in a month. People fall sick. People's kids fall sick. People get pulled away for other projects. When you're creating the audit plan, this is where you can be more detailed in terms of the date and the time that we have to carry out the function. This is an example of what an audit report can look like. I like things simple. I like things clean. I like things clear. I like things to the point. I don't want to have to waste too much time having to compile a report. What do? I train everybody on how to use the report. Everybody puts in the process that they audited, the document number, the section that's affected, if there's a section that's affected, and what the observation was. It could be a nonconformance, it could be an opportunity for improvement, it could even be a bravo. It could be something outstanding, it could be something critical, it could be a risk, it could be anything. And you import it there. The last column is reserved for who is responsible to close that out, should it need to be closed out. It's almost used as a checklist. We document the person responsible. We document the time frame that it's due. You can even speak in terms of quarters, Q1 2023, Q2 2023, Q4 2023. If you feel better at the end of a specific month, October 2023. You determine and you work with the people to determine what makes sense in terms of then providing the information that you need to close out this nonconformance. So true or false, checklists should always be used when performing internal audits.
Hey, I'm going to just hop in here for a second, Sabrina. This is Cindy. Everyone, I wanted to let you know we might go a few minutes over so that we can cover the content. If we don't get to your questions, we will send you an email follow-up with an answer, and we will send you the full recording. So if you do have a hard stop at 2 p.m., we'll definitely get you the recording so you can view it later. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Okay, let's see what we've got here. So checklists should always be used when performing internal audits. False. You don't have to. You're not obligated to use checklists. My checklist is the actual work instruction or the actual procedure, because all of the information I need is right there, and that's what I'm there to validate. Are we actually following what we're saying we're doing? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, let's make the changes. Like I said, it's easier to change words on paper than it is to change behavior. As long as you're still meeting regulatory requirements, certification requirements, and customer requirements, then you can start making those changes. Very good. This now brings me into management review. So what is a management review? Well, management review, the management review process requires top management to periodically, again, there's a magical word again, you're going to determine the frequency that you're going to hold them. Most organizations do them once a year. Some organizations do them more frequently. You decide. So you're going to periodically review the QMS to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness while addressing the possible need for changes to quality policy, objectives, targets, and other elements of the QMS. The management review is an important process that helps in identifying continuous improvement initiatives, which are at the core of your ISO 9001. So does ISO 9001 require management reviews? Do you need to do a management review? Yes or no? Good. Let's see what you guys have. Yes, they're mandatory. I did say that earlier. I kind of gave you a spoiler. They're absolutely mandatory. You do not do a management review, you will have an observation. You will have a major observation. It has to be closed within 90 days. Good. So this is covered under section 9.3, management reviews. The sections that are super important are 9.3.2 and 9.3.3, which talk about the inputs and the output. You want to make sure, however it is that you're going to frame the information, however it is that you're going to show the information. I love the idea of a PowerPoint presentation because my very first slide is management review, the name of the company, the date that I'm hosting the management review, the time, point. The second slide, I have all of my attendees, their job titles. If you want to go granular to the point of did they attend remotely or on site, you can. It's basically an attendees list to make sure that the people that you're reflecting the people that were actually present. The third slide, you would have like the agenda. So all of the inputs and the outputs. Verbatim, as it is written in the standard, which is exactly the way it's written right over here on this slide. And then you start your management review. And every slide thereafter, you will put a example, the status of actions from previous management reviews, and all of the pertinent content in there. So what is the status? Where are you at? Where were you last year? Compare yourself to this year. And you build your qualities and you build your management review that way. And one of the benefits of having a management review done through PowerPoint presentation, in my opinion, is that you already have a template for next year. All you need to do is revamp it for 2024. So management review outputs, this is what comes after your inputs have been all discussed. So here we can talk about opportunities for improvement. And what I like to do is, because during my internal audits, I always ask my colleagues, what are some risks that you have in your department? What are some opportunities for improvement you'd like to see? And I try to build all of those opportunities for improvement and reflect them in the management review so that collectively with management, we can decide on a couple of projects. We can have a plethora. We can have like 20, 30 opportunities for improvement that were identified. But we'll take 2 or 3, maybe 4 of them, all depending on the magnitude, and say, okay, this is going to be a focus for this year to show individuals that we are in fact listening to them and that we want to improve the conditions for them as well. We want them to be happy when they come into work. So that the opportunities for improvement, any needs for changes to the QMS, and the resource needs are all documented as outputs and can all be documented in the actual PowerPoint presentation as well. Management review process. Management reviews can be considered as a health check. So it's basically a control of the quality management system. It summarizes the activities, the events, the incidences, etc., that have happened throughout the year. You're shining a spotlight on them. It considers trends and non-conformances, corrective actions, risks, customer complaints, and it is generally conducted at the end of the internal audits performed for the year, and right before your external auditor comes to audit you. Like I mentioned, one of the tools that I like is the PowerPoint presentation because it also allows you to be very succinct. You are out of university, or at least some of you are anyway. You're not here writing a dissertation or defending your doctoral thesis. If any of you want to write a 25,000 word paper, I invite you to write mine. But the whole point of your management review, the whole point of your internal audits as you're conducting and you're putting all of the meat and potatoes together, the reports together, you want to be succinct. Get to the point. You don't need to be so wordy. That's all I have for you folks. I have one other question. Are meeting minutes required? Are they mandatory? Let's see what we got. Are meeting minutes mandatory? Meeting minutes are not necessarily mandatory. There's no requirement in the standard that says that you need to have meeting minutes. If you want to keep meeting minutes, you can, and there's different ways of doing that. You can keep it through Word, but you can also keep it as recordings. Sometimes when we're transcribing information on a Word document, some information can get lost in translation or might not be reflected in the meeting minutes. So often enough, what I tell people is like, if you feel comfortable keeping meeting minutes, think about a recording. You can sometimes get a whole lot out of a recording instead. Folks, that's all I've got for you. I leave it to you, Cindy. Floor is yours.
Sabrina, that was amazing. Thank you so much for giving us such a great presentation today. Everyone, thank you for staying to the end with us. We hope you found the session valuable. I'm sure you did. You can see there are some dates and so forth displayed here for upcoming training sessions that we have. So this will be provided to you in the follow-up when you get a copy of the slides, and it's going to have a link that you can link right out to our website and review that training. Also, if you'd like to reach us, you can do so. Here's our contact information. So we're going to just take a couple of quick questions here for those of you that can spend a little bit of time with us. Please do fill out the survey. There'll be a survey link in your thank you post-webinar email that we'll send to you. So you'll be able to click right through and take that survey. We really would appreciate your feedback. All right, Sabrina, we have so many questions. I'm not sure where to start, to be honest with you. There were some questions about, the internal auditor process and if there's a difference between, ISO and medical device and pharmaceutical standards. But I think that you addressed that. It's really about the process itself. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I see that there's one. We are ISO 13485 registered. Are there any significant differences with regards to internal audits and management review compliance needs? Okay, so I don't have that standard in front of me for me to actually compare and contrast. What I highly recommend that you do is take the standard of the med devices, take the 9001, and just see line by line, because I know that they started harmonizing through the Annex SL, and especially starting with the 2015 version of the standards, they started harmonizing many of the clauses. I'm not sure if 13485 was one of them. This is a conversation, if you like, my dear, you and I can have a conversation outside of this training session. I'd be more than happy to have this discussion with you. I really would. I just don't have that standard in front of me to do that compare and contrast for you right now. Any recommendations? I have Jean-François Parent. Any recommendations on ways, best practices to address corrective actions and measuring corrective actions? So corrective actions are actually a good thing. Some people look at corrective actions as being a negative. They're not. Generally, what we tend to see in industry is that they're inversely proportional with non-conformances. So if we tend to have a whole lot of corrective actions, then that means we're mitigating the non-conformances quite well. So we should see less non-conformances. What I mostly see are a whole lot more non-conformances and a lot less corrective actions. The way I like to address the non-conformances are I try to trend. I try to see, well, which are the ones that are, let's say, linked to supplier audits. And if it's one supplier in particular, I group those, I close off the non-conformance, and I open up a corrective action because there's probably an investigation that's required. When it comes to non-conformances, these are quick fixes. In industry, it's usually no more than 30 days, no more than 45 days to close them. Corrective actions can stay open longer because you are doing an investigation, you're doing all sorts of root cause analysis, whether it's the 5 whys, whether it's a fishbone, and sometimes you have to bring in different parties to have these discussions with. It's about really nipping the problem in the bud, and you have to invite these people to the proverbial table. So my recommendation is do follow-ups every month, and hold people accountable and responsible, especially people in quality, we often think that, oh, we're in quality, then we have to handle all the NCs and the corrective actions. That could not be further from the truth. No, you are managing it, but you're not an SME. You're not a subject matter expert in production and shipping and receiving and sales, wherever these other issues are being raised. If, however, there is a non-conformance corrective action that's required from the quality department, then that's the expectation that I would use to chaperone it myself because I'm in that department. Does the person training other internal auditors need to be a lead auditor certified, or can be just internal auditor certified? Just internal auditor certified is perfectly fine. Some organizations, however, have internal policies that stipulate that they must be lead auditor certified. In that case, you follow your internal policies and your internal procedures. But otherwise, there's no requirement for it, at least not for 9001. I have a good one. What is the most effective way? They're all fantastic questions. What is the most effective way to add GDP requirements in your quality manual? You're talking about an integrated management system. So what I would do is I would take something like what I have, what I showed you here. Hang on, let me go back to it. And I have, so this is broken up by process, is broken up by the document title, by the standard and the clauses. So what I would do is I would build standard and I would build the standard along with the clauses that pertain to the process. It can easily be, it's a pain, but it can be done. So this way, what you're showing is that you're showing it's an integrated management system. And then whatever is was not captured, then you can just put that as an extra and you will audit that in addition. Like I know with GDP, it's good distribution practices. So you would also have to consider risk in terms of shipping lanes. So if it's rail, if it's air, if it's by sea, and what those shipping lanes look like.
If I may, I see some of our attendees are from my hometown of Jamestown, New York, and some local businesses. So I just wanted to say hi and give you guys a shout out if you're still with us.
That's cute.
Thank you guys for coming. And again, we will be responding to your questions that we don't get to. We have so many questions today. Thank you for your thoughtful questions and participation. And we are going to have to wrap up, Sabrina, just because our platforms, we only have so much time to be on here. I think we're going to get shut down soon. So I wanted to say thank you. I think we're going to have to wrap up today. Sabrina, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure working with you.
Likewise, pleasure's mine, my dear.
All right. Thank you, guys. And we'll see you at the next session. There'll be a link to review our next session that's coming up. So hopefully you'll join us then. Thanks so much.
See you all soon.